At 9:30 on a cold December morning in 1932, on the 7th floor of the Bismarck Hotel in downtown Chicago, Murray Humphreys walked into a conference room carrying nothing but a leather briefcase and a reputation for making problems disappear without a single shot fired. Because of that, the gathering of 23 union officials, aldermen, and outfit representatives went silent. Because of that, the Chicago machine learned it could own a city not through bullets, but through ballots, pension funds, and the patient construction of leverage that would last 40 years. This is how one man built an empire that never made headlines. Most people know the names. Al Capone, the scar-faced king of bootleg whiskey and Tommy gun massacres. Sam Giancana, the wheeling-dealing boss who shared a mistress with the president. John Gotti, the dapper don who craved cameras and died in a cell. But the man who taught them all how real power works, the architect who built the invisible infrastructure that let organized crime survive long after Prohibition ended, remains a ghost in the public record. His name was Murray Humphreys, and he understood one principle that separated him from every flashy gangster who came before or after. Real power is quiet, it is patient, and it makes itself indispensable. The rules were simple. Control the unions, and you control the workforce. Control the politicians, and you control the law. Control the pension funds, and you control the future. Violence draws attention. Corruption done right looks like business as usual. Humphreys did not want to be famous. He wanted to be inevitable. He was born Llewellyn Morris Humphreys in 1899 in Chicago, the son of Welsh immigrants who worked the South Side hotel circuit. His father was a janitor. His mother cleaned rooms. By age 11, Murray was running packages for street crews, learning that information was worth more than muscle. By 14, he had dropped out of school and was working as a courier between ward bosses and speakeasy owners, watching how deals were made in whispers over lunch, not in alleys at midnight. By 16, he had been arrested twice for petty theft and once for burglary, but nothing stuck. He learned early that staying off the front page was the first rule of survival. In 1919, when Prohibition passed and turned every bar in America into a felony, Humphreys was 20 years old and already networked into the infrastructure that would become the Chicago outfit. He did not want to drive trucks or guard warehouses. He wanted to understand the supply chain, the payoffs, the political machinery that made it all run. So he made himself useful to the men who did. He carried messages, arranged meetings, and remembered every detail. He never raised his voice. He never carried a gun. He dressed in tailored suits and spoke in the calm, measured tones of a lawyer, which later he would nearly become. Johnny Torrio noticed him first. Torrio was the quiet architect of Chicago organized crime before Capone ever grabbed a headline. The man who turned scattered street gangs into a coordinated business network. Torrio believed in organization, planning, and buying cooperation instead of shooting for it. He saw in Humphreys a younger version of himself, someone who understood that the real fight was not on the street, but in City Hall, in union offices, in the back rooms where aldermen decided which speakeasies got raided and which stayed open. In 1922, Torrio brought Humphreys into the inner circle, not as muscle, but as a fixer. Humphreys' job was simple. Talk to people. Find out what they wanted. Make them an offer that sounded like partnership, not extortion. If a beat cop needed money for his kid's school tuition, Humphreys handed him an envelope and a schedule of which trucks to ignore. If a union delegate wanted help winning an election, Humphreys delivered votes and campaign cash, then quietly reminded him that favors earned, favors owed. He built a network of obligations that spread like roots under concrete, invisible until you tried to move against it. By 1925, Al Capone controlled the South Side, and the outfit was pulling in an estimated $100 million a year from bootlegging, gambling, and vice. But Capone had a problem. He was famous. Newspapers called him public enemy number one, Federal agents followed him. Rivals wanted him dead. Every move he made drew heat, and heat was expensive. So Capone relied on men like Humphreys to do what he could not: move in polite society, negotiate with politicians, and make sure the machinery kept running, even when the boss was on trial. Humphreys specialized in labor racketeering. He understood that unions were gold mines if you controlled them. Every construction project, every factory floor, every hotel and restaurant in Chicago depended on union labor. If you controlled the union, you controlled hiring, wages, strikes, and pension funds. If you controlled the pension funds, you controlled millions of dollars that could be loaned out, invested, or skimmed. And if you controlled the men who ran the unions, you controlled a political army that could deliver votes, intimidate rivals, and shut down anyone who complained. In 1927, Humphreys helped broker the outfit's takeover of the Teamsters Local 710 in Chicago. The local represented truck drivers, the men who moved everything from milk to bootleg whiskey. Humphreys did not storm into the union hall with guns. He walked in with a plan. He identified the union president, who was vulnerable, a man with gambling debts and a mistress he did not want his wife to know about. Humphreys paid off the debts, arranged a sit-down, and explained that the outfit could make his problems disappear if he cooperated. Within 6 months, the union was under outfit control. Humphreys installed a man named Joey Glimko as secretary-treasurer, a loyal soldier who understood that the real job was not negotiating wages, but delivering favors to the outfit. Because of that, the outfit could move liquor across the city without interference. Strikes could be called or canceled on command. Rival bootleggers who refused to cooperate found their trucks stuck at the depot, drivers suddenly unavailable. And the Union Pension Fund became a private bank for outfit investments, loaned out at favorable rates with no questions asked. Humphreys repeated the model across Chicago. By 1930, he had influence or control over locals in the Hotel Workers Union, the Restaurant Workers Union, the Laundry Workers Union, and the Bakery Drivers Union. He did not need to run the unions himself. He just needed to own the men who did. He attended their weddings, loaned them money, helped their kids get jobs, and quietly reminded them that loyalty was a two-way street. In 1931, the federal government finally nailed Al Capone, not for murder or bootlegging, but for tax evasion. Capone was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison and fined $50,000. He entered prison in 1932 and would never again run the outfit. The newspapers declared it a victory, the end of the Capone era. But inside the organization, nothing changed. The infrastructure Humphreys and others had built kept running. Power passed to Frank Nitti, Capone's enforcer, but the real work continued in the background, managed by men like Humphreys, who understood that the outfit was never about one man. It was a system. Humphreys expanded his portfolio. He moved into politics. He built relationships with aldermen, state legislators, and ward bosses. He learned how legislation was written, how votes were counted, how campaign contributions could buy silence or action. He attended political fundraisers, donated to both parties, and made sure the outfit had friends on every level of government. When a politician needed a favor, union support for a bill, votes delivered in a close election, a rival smeared in the press, Humphreys could make it happen. And when the outfit needed a favor in return, that politician knew who to call. In 1933, Prohibition ended. The 18th Amendment was repealed, and overnight the bootlegging industry that had fueled the outfit's rise collapsed. Rival organizations that depended entirely on liquor sales went bankrupt or tore themselves apart in turf wars. But the Chicago outfit barely blinked, because Humphreys and others had already diversified. They controlled gambling operations, loan sharking, labor unions, legitimate businesses, and political influence. The end of Prohibition was not a crisis. It was a transition. Humphreys focused on making the outfit legitimate, or at least legitimate looking. He pushed investments into legal businesses, restaurants, hotels, laundries, vending machine companies, jukeboxes. These businesses provided clean income, tax deductions, and cover for laundering money from illegal operations. And because the outfit controlled the unions that supplied workers to these businesses, they could operate with minimal interference. A restaurant that employed union waiters paid union dues, which went to outfit-controlled locals. A hotel that used union laundry services paid rates set by outfit allies. The system fed itself. By 1940, Humphreys was one of the most powerful men in Chicago, but almost no one outside the organization knew his name. He lived quietly in a modest home in the suburbs, drove a plain sedan, and avoided nightclubs and public spectacles. He met contacts in restaurants, offices, and hotel lobbies, never in places that drew attention. He kept no criminal record after his teenage arrests. He paid his taxes, donated to charity, and presented himself as a businessman and labor consultant. Law enforcement knew he was connected to the outfit, but proving it was nearly impossible. He left no paper trail. He never talked on phones that could be tapped. He never sent letters that could be intercepted. He conducted business face-to-face in quiet rooms with men who understood that talking to the police was suicide. In 1943, the federal government indicted several outfit leaders on charges of extortion related to the movie industry. The case centered on shakedowns of Hollywood studios through control of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, a union that represented movie projectionists. The outfit had threatened nationwide strikes unless studios paid bribes. The case was solid. Convictions followed. Frank Nitti, facing prison, killed himself on March 19, 1943, a single gunshot to the head near a railroad yard. He was 57 years old. Humphreys was named in the investigation, but never indicted. He had been careful. His role was advice and coordination, not direct extortion. Witnesses could not tie him to specific threats. He walked away clean while others went to prison. Because of that, he emerged as one of the outfit's senior strategists, a man whose value was precisely his ability to operate without leaving evidence. After Nitti, leadership passed to Paul Ricca and Tony Accardo, two men who shared Humphreys' philosophy: stay quiet, stay smart, and let the system do the work. The three of them formed the outfit's ruling triumvirate, with Humphreys handling political and labor operations, Ricca managing overall strategy, and Accardo overseeing enforcement and gambling. They rarely appeared in public together. They communicated through intermediaries. They built buffers between themselves and street-level crime. And they made millions. Humphreys' signature achievement in this era was the expansion of the outfit's grip on the Teamsters union nationwide. The Teamsters were the largest and most powerful union in America, representing truck drivers, warehouse workers, and freight handlers. Controlling the Teamsters meant controlling the flow of goods across the entire country. Strikes could cripple industries. Pension funds held hundreds of millions of dollars. And the union leadership, chronically corrupt and vulnerable, was ripe for infiltration. Humphreys cultivated relationships with Teamsters officials across the Midwest. He offered money, muscle, and political support in exchange for loyalty. He helped rig union elections, ensuring that outfit-friendly candidates won leadership positions. He arranged loans from the Teamsters pension fund to outfit-controlled businesses, money that was rarely paid back in full. By the early 1950s, the Chicago outfit had deep influence over Teamsters locals in Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, and Kansas City. And the man at the top of the Teamsters, Jimmy Hoffa, would eventually owe much of his rise to alliances with men like Humphreys. In 1950, the Kefauver Committee, a special Senate committee investigating organized crime, held hearings in cities across the country. Witnesses testified. Mobsters took the Fifth Amendment. The hearings were televised, and millions of Americans watched as gangsters, cops, and politicians were grilled under oath. The committee exposed the reach of organized crime into politics, law enforcement, and labor unions. It was a public relations disaster for the mob. Humphreys was subpoenaed. He appeared before the committee in a tailored suit, calm and polite. He answered questions with carefully worded responses that admitted nothing. He denied being a member of the outfit. He described himself as a labor consultant and businessman. He took the Fifth Amendment on questions that could incriminate him. He left the hearing without being charged. The committee called him the brains of the Chicago outfit, but brains alone were not enough for a conviction. The Kefauver hearings changed the landscape. Public pressure forced law enforcement to crack down on organized crime. The FBI, which under J. Edgar Hoover had long denied the existence of a national crime syndicate, finally acknowledged the mob and began building cases. But by then, Humphreys and others had already adapted. They had distanced themselves from street crime. They had insulated themselves with layers of intermediaries. They had buried their money in legitimate businesses and offshore accounts. The hearings made headlines, but the system Humphreys built kept running. In the late 1950s, Sam Giancana rose to power within the outfit. Giancana was everything Humphreys was not: flashy, violent, impulsive, and hungry for attention. He loved nightclubs, celebrities, and headlines. He dated Phyllis McGuire, a famous singer. He partied with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack. He allegedly worked with the CIA on plots to assassinate Fidel Castro. And he drew federal heat like a magnet. Humphreys watched with quiet disapproval. Giancana was making the same mistakes Capone had made, seeking fame instead of safety. Humphreys tried to advise caution, but Giancana did not listen. He believed his political connections and celebrity friendships made him untouchable. He was wrong. In 1963, the FBI launched a relentless surveillance campaign against Giancana, following him everywhere, tapping his phones and pressuring his associates. Giancana sued the FBI for harassment, a move that only drew more attention. The outfit, which prided itself on invisibility, was now a media spectacle. Old guard leaders like Humphreys and Accardo were furious. Giancana had violated the first rule: stay out of the spotlight. Humphreys, by contrast, continued to operate in the shadows. He brokered deals, managed union contacts, and advised on strategy. He rarely appeared in FBI reports. He avoided wiretaps by never discussing business on the phone. He met contacts in public places, parks, restaurants, train stations, places where recording devices were difficult to plant. He was a ghost, known to law enforcement but impossible to catch. In 1965, Humphreys suffered a heart attack. He was 66 years old and had been operating under stress for decades. The attack slowed him down, but did not stop him. He recovered and continued working, though at a reduced pace. By then, he had trained a generation of younger outfit members in his methods. He had institutionalized the system. The outfit no longer depended on any single individual. It was a machine, and Humphreys had built the engine. In 1967, federal prosecutors launched a new wave of indictments against outfit leaders, targeting labor racketeering and extortion schemes. Humphreys was named in several investigations, but once again, the evidence was insufficient. Witnesses refused to talk. Documents were missing. Paper trails were cold. Humphreys had been too careful for too long. He avoided prison while others, including Giancana, faced increasing legal pressure. Giancana fled to Mexico in 1966 to avoid federal charges, then moved to South America. He lived in exile for years, a pariah within the outfit. His recklessness had made him a liability, and the organization distanced itself from him. When he finally returned to Chicago in 1974, he was no longer in power. The outfit had moved on. Old leaders like Humphreys and Accardo remained in the shadows, running things quietly, while Giancana became a cautionary tale. On November 23, 1965, Humphreys was indicted on federal charges of conspiracy to defraud the Teamsters pension fund. Prosecutors alleged that he had arranged fraudulent loans from the fund to outfit controlled businesses. The case was strong. Witnesses were prepared to testify. Humphreys faced the real possibility of prison for the first time in his career. But the case never went to trial. On November 23, 1965, the same day the indictment was announced, Humphreys suffered a fatal heart attack at his home in suburban Chicago. He was 66 years old. His death was sudden, but not entirely surprising given his medical history. Some investigators suspected the timing was too convenient, but no evidence of foul play was ever found. The case died with him. Humphrey's funeral was small and private. A few family members attended. No mobsters showed up, following the outfit rule of avoiding public association with the dead. No headlines mourned his passing. The newspapers that covered his death described him as a suspected organized crime figure and labor racketeer, but they gave him a fraction of the attention lavished on Capone, Giancana, or Gotti. He had spent his entire career avoiding fame, and even in death, he succeeded. But his legacy lived on. The system he built, the infrastructure of union control, political corruption, and legitimate business fronts, continued to operate for decades. The Chicago outfit remained one of the most powerful organized crime families in America, well into the 1980s. Teamsters pension fund continued to be a source of outfit money long after Humphreys died. And the methods he pioneered, patience, leverage, invisibility, became the blueprint for organized crime in the modern era. Humphreys understood what flashy gangsters never did. Violence is expensive. Headlines are dangerous. The real power is not in being feared. It is in being necessary. If you control the unions, the politicians owe you. If you control the pension funds, the businesses need you. If you control the system, you do not need to threaten anyone. They come to you because they have no choice. Al Capone killed his way to the top and died in prison, brain rotted by syphilis, forgotten by the organization he once led. Sam Giancana chased fame and ended up exiled, then murdered in his own basement in 1975, shot in the back of the head while cooking sausages. A hit ordered by the same outfit he once ran. John Gotti craved the spotlight and spent his final years in a maximum security cell, locked in solitary, stripped of power, dying alone. But Murray Humphreys built an empire that outlasted them all, and he did it by staying quiet, staying smart, and making himself indispensable. He was the ghost in the machine, the man who understood that real power does not need a name. It just needs to work. And for 40 years, it did.